Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond, and you can find this show here at American Freedom Radio, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, as well as on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. And if you are new to the show, there are lots of ways to listen. You can find me on YouTube, of course, archived here at AFR and on my site. I'm also on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, FM player, a whole bunch of other podcatchers. Lots of ways to listen. There's some issue with Stitcher right now, just while we're mentioning it, and I'm trying to talk to their technical support staff, but the feed is not being updated, and it's still showing that the last episode is like episode 142 with Aaron. So something is wrong. Of course, they're saying it's not on their end, and then I've got to talk to my RSS feed provider. So I'm trying to figure that one out. But lots of other ways, lots of other podcatchers out there. But my apologies if you do use Stitcher and you haven't been able to hear any episodes. Although I would assume you would have tried something else, because that was, months ago, I think, the last episode. Very quickly, if you want to support my work, you can always go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond. You can become a subscriber for as little as $1 a month. I do have the bonus podcast. It's almost fully edited and ready to go. I just have this week has been a little cruel. Last week and this week have already been a little nutty. Going to another wedding, this is like the fourth one this whole fucking year, so it is wedding season, so that's sort of been taking up some time. But I will have the bonus podcast out hopefully in a few days, but it might be out, at the latest Monday, the 29th. But it was a really fun episode I did with John Duffy, who is one of the writers along with Ray Novoselsky, who wrote The Watchdogs Didn't Bark, and of course 9/11 Press for Truth, and also Who is Rich Blee, the two films right there. We actually ended up speaking for like an hour and a half. It was a lot longer than we thought. So that's a really fun episode. We get into some really interesting stuff about 9/11. So look out for that. There's also a new series of podcasts that I'm going to be doing for the Open Minds Foundation. So many of the listeners are probably aware of the Open Minds on Air show that I do every month, usually with John Atack and some guests. I'm doing a new series called Undue Influence in Pop Culture, and I'm doing that with Spike Robinson, who is a writer for the Open Minds Foundation, and she actually helps me out quite a lot behind the scenes. But we're doing a new show, as I said, Undue Influence in Pop Culture, where we look at various movies, TV shows, books, kind of anything that deals with undue influence, coercive control, cults and stuff. And we're going to kind of break it down and talk about what the movies get right and what they inevitably get wrong. So really fun series that we're going to be trying. We might be doing it maybe every other month, although if I can figure out a schedule, I'd love to do it once a month with Spike. But that episode should be out also within the next couple of days. Really fun one. We talked about 2 episodes from the original Star Trek from season 1. So really fun stuff. Definitely look out for that. And quickly, I just want to thank Seth for recently becoming a subscriber on Patreon. So thank you so much, Seth. And also, I've got some really fun shows coming up very soon. I'm going to be speaking with Artisan Loaf, probably maybe next week. We're going to be kind of expanding on our Elon Musk conversation and kind of diving more into Musk himself and what a nut job he is. So look out for that. I also have Patrick Knowlton who was a witness to Vince Foster's murder and has quite a history with Brett Kavanaugh. Patrick is going to be on the show very soon, and that'll probably be out maybe the first week in November. I'm pre-recording a bunch of these. Also, of course, I'm going to have my conversation with Ray Novoselsky and John Duffy. That'll probably be next week's episode. And also Joseph Flatley, the author of Sirhan or the Hallucinatory Vanguard. Joseph has a brand new book that is soon to be released, and I'm going to be speaking with Joseph about that. I was lucky enough to get a very advanced copy of the book. And there's some more kind of interesting stuff related to the book that I won't spill the beans on right now. But anyway, that is a very long introduction from me, and I want to welcome my guest, J.G. Michael, who is the host of Parallax Views, which is an excellent podcast. I highly encourage the listeners to go and download some of the recent episodes, or download all of them. They're all really, really fun. Very interesting. I think a lot of similar kind of topics are covered. You can find the show at parallaxviews.podbean.com, as well as lots of other podcatchers. I use iTunes to listen to JG's show. And listeners might remember that I was actually on Parallax Views a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was more like a month. I can't remember now off the top of my head. And I have to say, it was probably the best interview I ever did on Jeffrey Epstein. JG really asked some excellent questions. We got into a lot of stuff that I don't usually get to talk about when I discuss Epstein. So definitely the best interview I've ever done on that. But JG Michael, how are you? It's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Pierce. I'm glad to be here. I do want to mention I don't just do Parallax Views. I also do some freelance podcasting for a pretty good left-wing publisher called Zero Books. They're known for publishing Mark Fisher, who was a social critic and a left-wing activist. People should check out their work. I host a podcast over there called Alternatives. That's how I got my start.
Oh, excellent. I didn't even realize that. We'll for sure link up to all of that in the show notes. And Zero Books is right?
Yes, Zero
Yes.
Books. Yeah.
Well, yeah, people should check out Zero Books. They've actually got quite a lot of really interesting stuff. And this is such a weird coincidence, but Joseph Flatley recommended Zero Books to me, and you should get him on your show. You'd love his work.
Yeah, Joe and I have talked about the Hallucinatory Vanguard novel.
Oh, excellent! Oh, wonderful. Okay, cool. Well, you'll definitely like his new book. It's not a novel, but really, really fascinating stuff, and kind of there might even be a little bit of overlap to what we're going to be talking about today. But very quickly, JG, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. Who is JG Michael?
Well, before we do that, I wanted to say too, I'm glad you got Ray and John on with the Watchdogs Didn't Bark. I just had them on earlier in September, but I'm still editing the podcast. That's a very important book that I think people need to read.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's not just about 9/11. That's what people don't really realize.
Actually,
it's about the war on whistleblowers.
Yeah, no, that was actually what John and I the show that we recorded recently. We sort of focused more on the larger issues. We didn't get in. I mean, it is really fun to get into the kind of nitty gritty of 9/11, but that's not really what the book is about. So definitely it's a distinction that people should be aware of. And yeah, I definitely encourage people to check out the book. It's pretty easy to get a hold of it too. Not necessarily through Amazon. There's a lot of, I think Barnes and Noble carries it. There's a lot, and a lot of, I think, smaller bookshops will have copies of it. And if they don't, you can always, go to your local bookshop and ask them to just order the book for you, which takes literally the same amount of time as Amazon. You just have to interact with the person. So, encourage people to get, to talk to someone and get a book. But as I said, JG, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been podcasting for a few years now, but I have a long history on sort of the fringes of both sort of avant-garde art, culture, and also politics. I was involved with the 9/11 truth movement pretty early on. I wouldn't say that I'm really part of that anymore, but I think what will be really pertinent to today's discussion is sort of my teen years when I sort of had some relations and mentorship by people in the far right, which, just so everyone knows, I've sort of left that behind now. I find it really horrifying in this age of Trumpism.
This was something that you told me I think the last time we spoke after we recorded. It sort of came up, and do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, and again, preface this by stating that JG is no longer, I can attest to this, no longer part of the far right movement or associated with them. Certainly, if you listen to the types of shows that JG does, you'll get it'll be made clear. But tell the listeners, if you want to, a little bit about your sort of like grooming in that particular movement.
Well, I used to listen to this. I don't even know if it's still around, but it was sort of one of these online patriot movement networks when I was younger, when I was involved with the 9/11 truth side of things, and I think it was called like RBN.
Oh yeah, it's still around, I think.
Okay. I didn't know if I wanted to mention it, if it's competition or whatever, but I used to listen to a show called The Piper Report, which was Michael Collins Piper. Piper worked for Willis Carto, and Willis Carto is one of the architects of the post-war far right in America. And Michael Collins Piper is probably most known for the book, I believe it's called Final Judgment, which posits that the Mossad were behind the JFK assassination. And I called into Michael's show a few times. I was young and naive, and I didn't realize that Zionism, when used by a lot of people, especially on the right, is really a buzzword collective for all Jews, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I used to call into his show, and then we had more contact via email, and we just ended up talking a lot more than one would expect for a teenager to talk to, like, one of these people on the far right. I don't know if there's any specific questions you have about it, though.
Well, I guess, I mean, what was it? I'll preface this or get into this conversation that the larger topic that we're going to be talking about today is Gavin McInnes and the Proud Boys and sort of the rise of this sort of new right wing, which is obviously it's kind of the same right wing it's always been, but it's got a sort of a different veneer to it. But I wanted to sort of talk, I guess, like, back then, did you get any kind of sense that, like say Michael Collins Piper was sort of like, I don't know, wanted you to kind of like, take the big dive when it comes to this stuff, get more involved? I mean, what was like the nature of your conversations, or was it just sort of, just shooting the shit?
Well, Piper was kind of mentoring me in a lot of ways. He would tell me things to watch out for. As much as Piper was, I would say, a rabid anti-Semite, he was also a lot smarter than people on the current alt-right in the sense that he would say things to me like, no, that's BS. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, they're not running everything. Not all the Zionists are the same. So he was smart about he didn't take monolithic views. But he was sort of grooming me, and then he got me into contact with someone else who's still alive, so I don't want to really talk about that for fear of
yeah, sure,
opening up a can of worms. But I mean, they were trying to get me more involved. They wanted me to one of the two people wanted me to get involved with their daughter, pen paling with their daughter and stuff. So
really?
It seemed like they were trying to hook us up, so to speak.
Very strange.
But it's weird because I know Piper near the end of his life actually had a falling out with Willis Carto. And so Carto ran American Free Press, and he was grooming Michael Collins Piper to essentially take over for when he passed away. But it turns out that Carto wasn't paying Piper. So near the end of Piper's life, he started turning a little bit. You know, he would say things like he you know, if he were to go back into the 1960s, he would have supported people like Rosa Parks and MLK. So he was sort of turning against the whole white nationalist thing, even when he was, you know, working with American Free Press. And American Free Press is really interesting because it's sort of a precursor to the alt-right's whole game of pretending that they're not white nationalists.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because it has this, again, veneer. I mean, there are some real people that have written for American Free Press, you know, or people that are kind of considered like legitimate, you know, analysts or writers, and they've always maintained this, no, we're not racist, you know, we're just speaking truth to power and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it is like, I mean, this is also like the paper for the Institute for Historical Review, which is just a Holocaust denial organization that, again, kind of parades around as being, you know, Institute for Historical Review sounds really good, but, you know, it's a joke. Everything is about, you know, there were no gas chambers. That's sort of like the gist of that. So yeah, but continue on what you're saying there, JG, about like it sort of masquerading as not racist.
Well, it's just interesting because I know what Willis Carto was doing even before American Free Press. He was starting. I think he started the Liberty Lobby and the Spotlight, which was the precursor to AFP, and it was sort of he was trying to bring in people from the far left and the far right, and sort of being the DC sort of conspiracy rag du jour that, you know, people of all populist stripes would read. I mean, he even had people like L. Fletcher Prouty involved with Liberty Lobby, along with like characters like Ted Gunderson, who I consider one of the banes of conspiracy research. But yeah, Carto was definitely trying to put on a veneer with American Free Press. What's interesting is that Carto's first paper, I believe, was called Right, and he released it in the 50s or 60s. But Carto was the first person to publish, or one of the first people to really publish Francis Parker Yockey. Are you familiar with Yockey?
A little bit, but not probably to the extent that you are. Explain to the listeners a little bit.
Yockey was a sort of he was a lawyer during World War II, and then after the war he was sent to these like second string trials, and he decided that he wanted to side with the Nazis. And he ends up taking a very weird sort of turn in the 50s where he starts supporting Stalinism because of certain purges that were made in the Soviet Union, which he saw was purging Jews from the Soviet Union. So Yockey ends up supporting this weird alliance between fascism and communism. And he's completely anti-American, completely anti-USA, right? He believes that America is like the materialistic great Satan, so to speak. Yockey meets with or Carto meets with Yockey, I should say, when Yockey gets caught by the FBI. He was, you know, one of the most wanted guys. He was a target for the feds here. And Carto meets with him, and a week later, Yockey actually took a cyanide pill in his prison cell. And he was found dead. And it's interesting because he left a note, and he said, "You will never know who helped me, but he belongs to your multitudinous ranks," which I always found very interesting. It could just be that he was BSing, right? Sure. But, yeah, Carto basically was the guy that published Yockey's main work, Imperium. So Carto's history with the far right is very far-reaching as well.
Yeah, there's also, you know, if people are interested, there's the E. Howard Hunt lawsuit against the Spotlight. And Mark Lane from you know, the author of Rush to Judgment and a big JFK researcher, defended the
also
Liberty
one of
Lobby.
the only guys to He was one of the only guys to somehow survive Jonestown.
Yeah, no, I could go on and on about Mark Lane and my views on that. Well, and he was a fucking lawyer for Jim Jones and the People's Temple as well. And again, kind of linking up all this stuff. I mean, I've always been fascinated by the far right, the rise of the like white power movement, mostly because of my interest and fascination with the OKC bombing. And I don't know if this is like actually true or if this is just sort of one of those things that's been so repeated that it's become kind of accepted. But I know that it was reported that McVeigh took out a classified ad in the Spotlight under T. Tuttle, which was one of the pseudonyms that he used, supposedly a reference to the Tuttle character in the movie Brazil. And he had like a phone card that he had purchased from the Spotlight. And I say that I'm not sure about that because there are other rumors about, other right-wing papers that McVeigh had done this in. But, it's interesting too that this, a character like McVeigh, was using, the Spotlight, if he was for, classified ads and things like that. Of course, given McVeigh's sort of, interesting relationship to the military and intelligence and things like that. So yeah, the whole like Spotlight, Willis Carto, American Free Press. I mean, that sort of right wing has really kind of like faded away, hasn't it, JG?
Well, I want to comment real quick. Just a few more things, just to pinpoint how creepy the whole American Free Press thing really is. And this also, unfortunately, I don't want to speak ill of Mark Lane, because I know a lot of people that still support his work, but you mentioned that he was involved in the E. Howard Hunt case. What people forget is he was also involved in the Mel Mermelstein case. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
So the Institute for Historical Review was, I believe, sued by Mel Mermelstein, a Hungarian-born Jew. And he was the sole survivor of his family's extermination at an Auschwitz concentration camp. And he defeated the Liberty Lobby, but the people defending the Liberty Lobby, the person, I should say, defending the Liberty Lobby, was Mark Lane in that case.
Okay.
So that's and actually Michael Collins Piper wrote a whole book about that. I think it was called
yes,
the Mel Mermelstein Affair.
Oh, I know that he wrote a book about Mark Lane. Okay, so that's the case that it's referencing.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and it's weird for me talking about the Piper stuff because on a personal level, I was like fond of Piper, but like I find his views really abhorrent. Even though I think at the end he was starting to do as they would call it in wrestling, a little bit of a face turn. But it's kind of a weird area for me to get into just because we talked so much and like you get to know a person on that level. And it's like when you're young, you don't think about the bad side of them. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh yeah, totally. Oh, I mean, I've talked about it on the show before. I mean, not quite on the same level as like Michael Collins Piper, but I mean, I was pretty deep into like the libertarian movement for years, and like the kind of like Lew Rockwell Mises Institute. I became obsessed with Walter Block and all of these, pretty right wing, fairly reactionary politicians. And
I had a libertarian on my show, and he seemed very concerned about people within those circles reading stuff like the what is it that what's the really racist book that McVeigh was into?
The Turner Diaries.
Yes, he was telling me how there were people that he knew in the 90s within those sort of far end of the libertarian circles that would hand him copies of that.
Oh yeah, I mean that was.
And I was like, I don't find that surprising, to be honest, given what came out of the Ron Paul movement.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, there's the whole that incident with the newsletter. The racist newsletter that was being put out by Ron Paul, again, while Lew Rockwell was the editor of that. But I definitely, I went to, Liberty Fest, back, I don't know, I think I'd just gotten out of college maybe a year or two after that. And I went to it down in New York, and there were some really interesting people, that were speaking there. There's, this guy, John Bush, who's probably the only like libertarian I'd actually listen to nowadays. And he, was interesting because he sort of badmouthed half the people that had come to talk. And he went on and on about, this adherence to the Constitution, is crazy from many people in the libertarian movement. And, it's just this piece of paper written by a bunch of slave owners and, lots of murmurs when he was, bitching about the founding fathers. Because for whatever reason, libertarians love, those elitists.
Well, it depends on the type of libertarian. The Lew Rockwell and von Mises camp, you'll find a lot of them that actually, don't like the Constitution that much.
Yeah,
a lot of them that reference, there's a libertarian activist, Boston Tea Party, who wrote a book called the Constitution Hologram. And, the argument of those people, and this is the argument of a lot of people, I would say probably in that far end of the libertarian movement, is that the Constitution is bad because it's not like the Articles of Confederation. It gave too much power to, the federal government. So. That's the loony side of libertarianism.
Yeah. There were other things too. I mean, the founder of the Oath Keepers was there. And he, when I saw him speak, was talking about, how like the war on drugs was the biggest problem, and that we really needed to decriminalize everything, and that, and he even said, again, this is to a packed room of basically all white guys, that, the sort of war on black and brown people is real, and that it's happening, and that the Oath Keepers should be about, pointing this out. Now, cut to nowadays, you'd never, now they basically are just, this sort of like extension of the police state in some ways. They certainly love the cops. And all these idiots show up at rallies, decked out in flak jackets and assault rifles and things like that. And probably the craziest part of this whole thing was the fact that Christopher Cantwell was there speaking, who is the famous,
he's a scumbag.
Nazi.
Crybaby Cantwell.
Yeah, exactly. So I met him, in person. I believe I even, spoke to him. He was speaking to like a group of a bunch of us. And this was like when he was sort of like fat and balding and wasted all the time. He was talking about moving to New Hampshire and all this stuff. And now, he's become this, I don't really know what he's become. I think it's some kind of front or something. I don't really know what it is, but he's become sort of a joke again for crying and going on Vice and all this. His rhetoric is pretty BS. But it's like those were the kind of guys that I met personally or interacted with when I was in the more into the libertarian movement. And I would definitely say that all of that kind of contributed to my eventual disgust of the direction that the movement had gone in. And again, they were basically, even when I was there, there was still this sort of sense that, the libertarian movement, or even like the LP, in, New York, like the New York Libertarian Party was sort of, actually like had principles in these things and that they were alternative. But there were lots of also just, straight, Republicans there that were kind of espousing some of this like libertarian stuff, and then also just people that like Chris Cantwell, who was just like a Nazi, anti-Semitic white nationalist, who was just sort of parading around as being a libertarian, having principles. And I think we cut to Gavin McInnes and the Proud Boys, and they sound very similar to a lot of the people that I met, places like Liberty Fest, and I would even say, McGinnis has used the libertarian, moniker for himself as well, at various times. I don't know if he would still kind of go by that, but I don't know, JG, do you have any other, perspective on how this movement has kind of shifted over time?
Well, I can tell you that a lot of the philosophical and intellectual side of this new right in America, right? A lot of the underpinnings come from the really far reaches of libertarianism combined with the Silicon Valley. The interesting thing about the libertarians, especially sort of that Lew Rockwell, von Mises camp, I think if you actually read between the lines of what someone like Murray Rothbard is actually saying, it's really actually very authoritarian.
Oh yeah, totally.
I mean, when I hear them talk about we should privatize everything. We should privatize the police. It ends up being very authoritarian because what happens to the people that can't afford a police force? It's like something out of Judge Dredd. And they want to pretend that it's all this, sort of like nice, there will be no class struggle anymore, blah, blah, blah type thing. And they're lying. Through their teeth, I might add. It's actually, there's an author at von Mises, Hans-Hermann Hoppe, who's much more honest about it in a lot of ways. He sort of basically is calling for sort of a neo-feudalism. And that's what a lot of the more intellectual wing of the, I don't know if you'd call it the alt-right. A lot of them like to call it neo-reaction. But that's sort of what they're into. The main guy behind that was, Curtis Yarvin, who, Steve Bannon has allegedly read. Curtis Yarvin basically wrote this unreadable, insanely Thomas Carlyle worshipping blog entitled Unqualified Reservations. I can't always decipher it, but he's sort of the intellectual forebearer to a lot of these people. And he's influenced by Rothbard and them. And also he comes out of the Silicon Valley tech crowd.
Oh, yeah, there's the Silicon Valley connection to a lot of this. Well, I mean, also Stanford, super, libertarian right-wing university. That's you got Peter Thiel going there. I mean, you've got a lot of
Peter Thiel backs Curtis Yarvin's computing platform called Urbit. And there is a right-wing connection to what Yarvin is trying to accomplish with the Urbit. I can't really get into it. It's too long to get into. But Thiel is hooked up to this Curtis Yarvin character, who I should mention. Curtis Yarvin is actually more well known by his pen name, which shows you it's kind of a dorky pen name, Mencius Moldbug. But he's one of the people that spearheaded this neo-reaction stuff.
Yeah, very. The roots of this are interesting, and you know what I find too is that this is really just sort of not understood, or people don't actually care to kind of go through this. I found that a lot when I would talk to, so-called libertarians, these people that again, and they're all kind of pontificate about how smart they are. You've got to read this and, these 15 books. And then none of them have read any of those books. I never met anyone that had actually read some of Rothbard's writings. And I did read them, and they're pretty, not unreadable, but it's a very specific style of writing, and it's not super interesting. Even though, he's supposed to be the most prolific, writer on the planet. I mean, they praise him like L. Ron Hubbard or something like that. Like Scientologists. But, I would meet these guys, they'd never actually read, a case against the Fed, which is tiny. That's the easiest one to get into. Let alone, Man, Economy, and State, or, something, even The Anatomy of the State. Again, a fairly short book. Power and Market. They'd never really read any of these books. Now, they might have heard some lectures about Rothbard, or sort of, breeze through his Wikipedia page and kind of, cherry picked a couple of things here and there. But there's no, real substance. And I find that that's, that kind of research, if you can call it, or that sort of stuff, I mean, has then trickled all the way down to these people that call themselves Proud Boys. I mean, they literally don't read anything. There is no actual intellectual basis behind what they're talking about. And they really are just sort of like a weird street gang with McInnes at the top. And I know I keep kind of like jumping back to the Proud Boy stuff, so maybe we can kind of get into what recently happened back. This was on, I think, October 12th. But I mean, before we kind of go there, JG, is there anything else you wanted to kind of just touch on? Some of the stuff that we've been talking about, and the kind of like, I don't know, intellectual destruction or sort of like, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just sort of like,
well, I wanted
like
to get
anti-intellectual.
Yeah, it is anti-intellectual, I think, in a lot of ways. I wanted to keep on this thread of, like, I think this Moldbug character is very important, and what I would recommend people read about is the sort of 2000s nerd culture, because that's where Moldbug comes out of. He comes out of the sort of techie programmer culture, particularly a website called Less Wrong. And Less Wrong is actually very central to all this. Less Wrong was a forum, I believe it was founded by Elijah Yudkowsky, one of these Silicon Valley tech guys who believes in researching for friendly AI so we don't get Skynet. These people are really out there. But Less Wrong was a forum dedicated to solving problems through logic and logic only, basically. Rationality is their thing. And what they would advocate their forum members do is to think more and more like machines, remove any emotional aspect from how you approach problems. So it very quickly became this sort of anti-PC, say whatever you want, even if it's not, appropriate, whatnot, type free-for-all. And a lot of anti-SJW culture and sort of this, I mean, I think SJW is just a kind of slur that's made up by people like Sargon of Akkad anyways. But a lot of that actually comes out of Less Wrong and the programming culture. Interestingly, I've always found it fascinating that, Scott Adams, the guy from, the guy who created Dilbert, programming guy, also kind of aligned with the alt-light. Another one that I always found interesting was a programmer is Mike Judge. I know people like that movie Idiocracy, but I actually think that's one of the most mean-spirited, sort of socially Darwinistic movies ever. And even something like Beavis and Butthead it's like that's, like, people don't get the joke. Like, he thinks that everyone that watches MTV is just a moron. So a lot of this programming culture, it's weird. I think it creates a lot of, misanthropy in people.
Well, there's like something so detached about a lot of it too, like when you're just like sitting in front of a computer, programming and stuff. I mean, there's this real, you become like detached from, not only even necessarily like reality, but just like from, humans and interacting. And I think there is like this sort of harshness that it instills.
I don't want to say it's that necessarily, because there's a lot of people that are in programming I know that are very left-wing, very progressive, very into human rights. I think, though, Silicon Valley, there's an aspect of Silicon Valley that is, there's a lot of small L libertarians within the Silicon Valley that end up going to the right. And I think a lot of it just has to do with this, like, it's like the Mike Judge thing. I'm not surprised Mike Judge comes out of the programming culture. There's sometimes this attitude, I think, of, why can't everyone just be as smart as me? I'm completely logical. I'm not affected by social conditioning. All these other idiots, I should be the philosopher king of Plato's Republic. That type of mentality, I think, can infect the programming culture at times.
Well, then there's also just like again, this is like a generalization. I think in Silicon Valley, because I know a very good friend of mine is a programmer, and she's actually in grad school right now, and doing some really kind of interesting, and again, not like the sort of Silicon Valley stuff, but I think there's also just a lot of that Silicon Valley culture is also, it's this really kind of like hyper masculine, like we all know the like tech bros, which are really like the worst kind of bro of all, ever, except for maybe like the sort of like stock market bros. But, there's also like that culture is there. And again, a lot of the stuff that we see being mimicked in the alt-right, alt-light, all of that kind of like hyper-masculinity, is also kind of present in a lot of the, Silicon Valley environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of, they sort of almost like encourage that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think I have a way of tying this into Gavin McInnes. I've always found it interesting that these characters like Moldbug, if you read his blog, he was the first one to use the term red pill. And he also makes a lot of references to, DMT use. And it's interesting because, the more you look for it, the more you'll find that there's a legacy of far right-wingers that are very interested in psychedelic usage. People like Michael Moynihan, who had a band called Blood Access. He also wrote the book, the definitive sort of history of Norwegian black metal, called Lords of Chaos. But Moynihan's generally considered very far right, and he's always been very interested in how Europeans would use mushrooms in their culture and psychedelics and whatnot. And I've heard a lot of just talk of psychedelic culture within the alt-right, that's why
Cernovich.
A lot of them are fans of Rogan. Oh, Cernovich,
yeah.
Really?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, he doesn't really do it. I haven't seen him do it in a little while because he's, yet again, Mike Cernovich is reinventing himself as we speak. But yeah, sometimes he would, babble on Twitter or Periscope, about how many times he had taken acid and DMT and, how wonderful it is. And his weird sort of like, linking, new age ideas with, his brand of like, I don't know, male dominance and all that kind of crap. Yeah, but he would babble on about it sometimes. But yeah, I was going to say the whole Rogan thing. Like, yeah, they all love Joe Rogan. And I don't know why Joe Rogan continues to just be this like platform for, he's had Gavin McInnes on.
He knows his audience.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's so funny that he's like, I don't know, there's something, his like rejection of like conspiracy stuff, it's strange to me with Joe Rogan. I don't quite get where he's going and like what his whole agenda is, if he even has one. I don't know.
Well, the thing that I find that connects all these people, you have a tech bro sort of nerd like Mencius Moldbug, aka Curtis Yarvin. You have McInnes, who is just sort of what is it? How would I describe
hipster.
it? He's
like an asshole.
He's a punk hipster that decided to become like racist Mr. Rogers now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he mimics that nerd stuff too, with the glasses, and he wears pocket protectors.
They're all into that. Like they're there's like a whole goth aspect to a lot of the right wing. They've infected that scene. They infect everything they can get their hands on. Entryism, as we call it.
No, it is. I remember my sister and I were having like this long conversation about the problems with like nerd culture. 'Cause as people know, obviously I guess I consider myself a nerd. I don't really like that term anymore. I think it's sort of like lost all meaning. But everyone knows that. Obviously the name of the show is based on a minor character in Star Wars. I'm obsessed with anime and all that kind of stuff. But there's like this weird, even like Big Bang Theory, this show that's supposed to be so fucking popular and it's so, I've never watched a show where I've literally just not laughed once or had any kind of reaction to it. But so much of that is that same thing. It's just like, all women are basically should just be sort of like hot, put on pedestals. They're kind of dumb and idiots and like, we're sort of, introverts and stuff, but we're so amazing. We're so necessary. It's like you were kind of saying before, like we are the philosopher kings. That is like all over, nerd culture and, Ryan Carey talks about this all the time with like the whole comics gate and, this sort of like, weird right wing, stuff going on like in Marvel and DC comics. There was, I forget, it was like I think, some like alternate universe with like where Captain America was like a Nazi. And this was being promoted all over 4chan and Stormfront.
Hail Hydra was the
yes.
was the
yeah,
meme
yeah,
they
yeah.
used.
So yeah, there's like some strange, I don't know if it's like an inferiority complex that a lot of these guys are suffering from.
Well, Moldbug, I don't think ever finished college, so.
Okay.
He's a very odd character. He's clever, but I think he's more clever than he thinks he is. But it's interesting that like someone like him who comes from that sort of nerdy introverted tech background, and then someone like McInnes who just wants to put on like I guess the Proud Boys more as a whole want to put on this more like, oh, we're like thugs, we're like a gang, you know, they punch each other, and do the cereal ritual. I mean, it's kind of all, it's very childish. But, it's weird because, like you said, Cernovich, all these people are like, if you put them into a room together, they would seem like fish out of water. Right? Like you have Cernovich, the Pizzagate New Age guy, then you have Moldbug, the nerdy tech bro, then you have McInnes, who's like the washed out punk hipster, but they all agree on a lot of stuff. That's what's scary about it.
Yeah, no, totally. Like you said too, the way that the right wing is just kind of like infects all of these seemingly disparate groups, and kind of brings them all together. That's what's so odd. And then they all worship Trump, who is like even more of a fish out of water. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't fit into any of those sort of circles or anything like that. I mean, he's a fucking joke. He's just a fat, bloated sack of shit, who's been handed everything by his daddy, and is just so intellectually so, barren.
Well, he is the mayor into them. I mean, It's not a coincidence that 4chan types, worship a hedonistic casino magnate, because they're degenerates against degeneracy. So they like the degenerate that got out on top.
Yeah, I know. Well, and speaking of like degenerates, McInnes is just the ultimate degenerate. I mean, I'm sure you've seen
one of the Proud Boys last year died of an overdose. And not to attack someone for those type of things, but I mean, these are not people with their lives together. It's actually sad in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, totally. That's what I was going to say. I mean, it's interesting. I was on 4chan a couple of days ago, when I was like making notes
I'm so sorry.
Sorry. I know. Well, you never just like pop over and just see what's going. I mean, I was doing it more for a while because when I was like more into the QAnon phenomenon and just trying to like understand what the hell people were thinking. But 4chan is like, I don't actually really fully understand how you like follow threads and stuff on that. But, it's interesting that a lot of, again, you were saying that, they're sort of like degenerates who hate degenerates, but on a lot of these things, they like kind of hate Gavin McInnes because he does things like, he put the, butt plug in the middle of his radio show and then, forced it out. The whole like urinating in public and that he used to wear a diaper, his whole friendship with Terry Richardson. I mean, all the stuff advice is like, he was just like, when he was there, like a scary cokehead who was just, having sex and being disgusting all the time. And it's funny that he now, he only wears these like expensive suits. He's always got a big ass watch on, again, sort of the like, we can get into this a bit later, like the whole Tommy Robinson thing. This is Mr. Working class stiff, oh, gee golly, Tommy Robinson, and he's wearing, a $5,000 suit. I don't see him mucking about with all of the, his like thuggish supporters. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know. It's so odd. That you got guys like Gavin McInnes that have kind of like elevated to this level, and I don't know. I mean, we're up at the end of the first hour, and we'll obviously continue this a bit in the second hour. But I guess, JJ, what do you just like first impression? I mean, what do you make of Gavin McInnes? Who he is and how he's kind of like gotten to this level, because he now is fairly influential. Like people really tend to like buy into his crap. Cernovich, was just, fawning over McInnes. Now, of course, you'd think that they'd never met each other, cause Cernovich is sort of leaving that sinking ship. But, what do you make of Gavin McInnes?
The enema of America? I don't know. I mean, the whole Vice crew, I mean, those were people that did the fake it till they make it game in the first place. They pretended that they were bigger than they were, and eventually people started to believe it. And, they actually told their employees for the longest time, we're doing this for the culture, while some of the founders were living in mansions. So, I mean, the whole, I'm not surprised Gavin McInnes became a right-wing, what's the word?
Provocateur, I guess is the term they've been using.
I wanted to use I don't know if you allow cuss terms. I was going to say a shit word.
I've been cursing the whole time. Yeah, you can curse as much as you like.
Gavin McInnes is a shitlord. And just the whole thing I don't get about McInnes is that he really is just racist Mr. Rogers. If you read his memoir, it's basically like, yeah, I did all this crazy stuff when I was younger, but then I grew up. I married a Latino or a Native American woman, so I'm not racist, but I'll talk to Richard Spencer.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think his wife is Ho-Chunk, which is a tribe, I think, in the Southwest. I'm not exactly sure.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
Yeah, she is, in fact, which is like another weird, aspect to all of this. And again, why, like, if you go to like some of the darker sectors of 4chan or Stormfront or any of those, I mean, they think he's like a race traitor or whatever, which is strange. Although, and this is something I'd love to kind of, we'll explore a bit more in the second hour, but I mean, there's also just like a lot of like, black Proud Boys. And there's the whole weird subset of like Latino skinheads, that have, swastika tattoos and hang out with like white Nazis as well. And again too, McInnes uses all those people too to be, so I'm not racist, even though all I do is say racist stuff. Have
you seen the interview he did of, Richard Spencer where, they're laughing and, all this stuff throughout the whole thing, making fun of feminism. And then Spencer says something like, I know Angela Nagel, one of Zero Books author of Kill All Normies, which covers a lot of this. She's talked about it. Spencer says in the interview something like, civilization is the mist and, the race is the lake. He was saying that like race is above all else in this whole thing. And Gavin McInnes just looks horrified. And he just says, you don't really believe that, do you, Richard? It's like he's so overdosed on irony that he did not realize what he got into. Yeah, and I think the idea that Proud Boys is not an entryist group for white supremacism is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the odd thing with McInnes is like, I really do wonder if he truly like buys it. You know what I mean? Like, now he'll say racist things all the time, and like I tend to believe that he is a racist and that he does, hold these sort of like, stereotypes in his mind at all time. But yeah, there are those moments then where it's like, dude, do you really buy it though? Or like, are you just like, it's gone so far now, like you have to kind of like embody this?
Well, I don't think McInnes is like a Nazi fascist. I just think he's a racist Republican that realizes he can get money from these idiots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the other thing too. Yeah, like I don't, the whole like, again, it's like, the term Nazi is sort of almost like lost all meaning. But yeah, I don't think he's actually a Nazi. Like you said, I think he's just a racist. Well, we are at the break right now, but we will be continuing this conversation with J.G. Michael of Parallax Views. Stay tuned.
Yes, I like very much
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Have you experienced the miracle of CBDs? They can help you reduce suffering, reduce stress, help you sleep better, modulate inflammation in the body, and is absolutely safe. Meta Hemp Solutions offers a radically innovative approach to CBDs for exceptional results. Stop suffering and reduce your stress now. Isn't it time for a good night's sleep? Stop worrying about tomorrow today. Lab tested for potency, purity, and is non-psychoactive. Free shipping to all 50 states. Try our product risk-free. Money-back guarantee. Use code AFR15 to get 15% off. That's Alpha Foxtrot Romeo 15 to get 15% off. Offer ends soon, so visit MetaHemp Solutions today at metahempsolutions.com or call 833-858-7500. Suffer no more. Get rid of the stress and sleep better. Get our product now at metahempsolutions.com. That's metahempsolutions.com.
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
Are the trials of modern-day living getting to you? Feeling tired all the time with no energy? Is proper nutrition a challenge? Having trouble sleeping? All of these evils, sleeplessness, tiredness, poor nutrition, and stress, wreak havoc on our bodies and minds. Enerfood, our incredible organic superfood, has been here to save your life day by day for over 14 years. With the densest nutrition on the planet, Enerfood is filled with 20 superfoods and super herbs designed to cure the evils of modern life. Enerfood will turn you into a superhero, and your family and friends will notice. Don't you want that get-up-and-go feeling you need to seize the day? Why wait? Try it today and start feeling great again. Order now at www.enerfood.com and use the code TR15 for 15% off, or call 866-762-9238 to place your order by phone. Use code TR15 for 15% off Enerfood at www.enerfood.com.
When the weapons of mass destruction turned out not to be true, I expected the American people to rise up. They didn't. Then, when the Abu Ghraib torture thing surfaced, and it was revealed that our government participated in rendition, a practice where we kidnap people and turn them over to regimes who specialize in torture, I was sure then the American people would be heard from. We stood mute. Then came the news that we jailed thousands of so-called terrorist suspects, locked them up without the right to a trial or even the right to confront their accusers. Certainly, we would never stand for that. We did. And now it's been discovered the executive branch has been conducting massive, illegal, domestic surveillance on its own citizen, you and me. And I at least consoled myself that finally, the American people will have had enough. Evidently, we haven't. In fact, if the people of this country have spoken the messages, we're okay with it all.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow, friendships to flourish, with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, rocket copy. 3, 2, 1. Engage.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio. Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Porkins Policy Radio. I am your host, Pierce Redmond. If you are joining us here in the second hour, we are speaking with J.G. Michael, who is the host of Parallax Views. And also, remind me again, J.G., what is the other podcast that you do?
Alternatives over at Inside Zero Books, which is part of the Zero Books publishing house.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So, and again, we will link up to all of that in the show notes. And I highly recommend JG's work. I think it's a great show. I love the kind of guests that you have on and the topics, and I love too that they're like long form. There's like too many short podcasts out there. I don't know. I like the longer show, so I like that it's sometimes you do like 2 hours, which is wonderful. So we were kind of we'd sort of started talking about the Gavin McInnes stuff, and I wanted to just maybe we won't spend as much time as I initially thought, but I did want to just talk about this incident that happened back on October 12th at the Met Club, the Metropolitan Republican Club here in New York, which is up on 79th Street on the east side. But Gavin McInnes had been invited back to the Met Club. He has spoken, I think, maybe a year or so there on free speech or whatever idiotic thing he was talking about. But he was invited back recently on October 12th, and this was it was an event that where he was going to reenact the murder of a very famous Japanese socialist, Inejiro Asanuma, and this was marking the 58th anniversary of when he was stabbed to death by Otoya Yamaguchi during a televised political debate with a yori doshi, which is like a small sword that samurais would use. And yeah, he was like this guy, Yamaguchi, who I think was like, I don't know, maybe 19, just ran up on stage and stabbed him in front of everybody. There's a very famous picture which won the Pulitzer Prize that year, I think in 1960 or 61, of him pulling the sword out of Asanuma. But and this was, what Gavin McInnes was there for. And he had the Proud Boys in tow, and again, he kind of couched it as this whole, it's just a joke, and like, on his like Instagram account, he had a picture of, Yamaguchi, the murderer, and then, it was a picture of Gavin McInnes with like, he had on glasses with like, stereotypical like Asian eyes. So, it's all, haha, it's all funny. But he really does consider Yamaguchi like a hero, of the, whatever alt-right, right-wing Proud Boys movement. They consider him like a martyr, and that he was, it was great that he went and murdered a prominent socialist live on television. And this, obviously kind of like spiraled out of control afterwards, when there were Antifa protesters across the street. There was like a fight, which does, it does seem like, some Antifa guys might have thrown, like a bottle or something at some of these Proud Boys. And then, about 10 of them basically beat the crap out of 3 of these, black-clad, protesters. It's pretty brutal. And it's kind of like, who really cares, like, who actually started it? You know what I mean? Because then afterwards, if you watch the footage, these guys are screaming, walking down, like 79th Street, screaming. They're throwing out all sorts of like homophobic slurs, talking about how they were beating these guys. Like they were hyped up. And again, they had just seen Gavin McInnes, give a speech in reenactment where he was reenacting the murder of a leftist. So, I mean, again, what the hell do you really think, what do you think was going to happen? But, and this is what I find is like kind of weird. It's like McInnes' whole message is all about violence, but it's always this kind of like double speak. And I wanted to kind of, get your perspective on that, JG, because he openly advocates and praises the use of violence. He's like, no, violence solves everything. We should start killing people. There's the famous speech or whatever on his radio show where he's like talking about, choke everyone, get your fingers around their windpipe, get a gun, kill people, get fired from your job, get in this whole movement. And then, he turns around and is like, Antifas they're the violent terrorists.
And I was just being ironic. I was being ironic with that other stuff.
Yeah. And it's like I find it's like this sort of like subtle, manipulation, mind control over the Proud Boys, where again, it's like, no, we're just being ironic. Like, we're just about drinking beer and hanging out and being men, but we're gonna like beat, people to death. And then that's like this whole thing with the Unite the Right, rally in Charlottesville, which was like, organized. I think Kessler was a Proud Boy. And then no, he wasn't one of us, or he left the movement. And it's like, okay. do you have like a, like an actual, like, you've cards and stuff like that? I mean, like, how do you leave the movement? Like, I don't even know what that means. And yeah, it's all this like, oh, we're being ironic. But then it's like he obviously is channeling something with this whole reenactment of the murder of a leftist. So, I mean, JJ, what do you think of the kind of like double speak, double think going on here? Because my impression is that, McInnes is basically just using all of these people to, I think, just sort of enrich his own life and I guess kind of get some degree of power. Because, I mean, he tells these guys, jump, and they say how high. And the funny thing is, it's now come out that McInnes is like, oh, we have a lot of support in the police department. We love the cops. It's like, oh, you're so punk. You just love the NYPD. And he's like on record saying like, we're never going to, stand down and we're always going to fight. And now McInnes has already basically contacted a bunch of these Proud Boys and told them to turn themselves into the cops. And he's not going to go to jail, obviously. And again, he's wearing, these expensive ass suits and watches. And then all these Proud Boys are kind of dressing like skinheads, and, acting like McInnes isn't out there throwing punch. I know he has in the past, I guess. But, like, what do you make of the sort of like double speak, double think going on with McInnes and his followers?
Well, I think it's nothing new, really. I think this has always been a game for the right, at least in the past decade. It's always crying wolf. I remember when I was growing up, people would always, the Republicans would always say, oh, those liberals, they're, pussies, and now they say, oh, well, Trump is revenge for all the years that liberals have abused us. not that I agree with the Democrats or like milquetoast liberals either, but there's always been that double speak, and it's reached a new level now where you have Trump talking about globalists and how he's a nationalist now, and right. McInnes is part of that, and I think the key point with this Antifa versus Proud Boys stuff is, Proud Boys are they're thugs, they're brown shirts,
mm-hmm.
I think there's more dangerous ones out there, like you mentioned the Oath Keepers. What the Oath Keepers want to do is they essentially want to be a paramilitary unit. Right. That's the goal. There's even more extreme ones than that. The one that worries me is, are you familiar with the neo-Nazi group, the Atomwaffen Division?
Very, vaguely. I know they exist, but I've never really looked too deep into it.
They have lone wolf cells that are in contact with people like, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And, they're advocating, open terrorism now. But I mean, all of these groups have this thing in common where they want to, have their violence essentially. And, the Proud Boys are probably the most careful about how to play the game without getting totally thrown off the tracks.
No, I definitely. And that's what I kind of find like so pathetic. Like I almost feel bad for some of these guys because they're obviously like, I don't know. I mean, just so unhappy. Like they never seem like they're in a good mood, or that's what's so funny is like they're always like, oh, joking. And it's like, you must have the most empty existence in life. If this is how you like feel alive, is like beating the crap out of some like skinny, anarchist in air quotes.
Well, have you noticed, that a lot of these people are starting to, drop out? Especially on YouTube. Blair White, recently said she's never going to do another political video. She's mad at someone whose show she was on. I'm assuming it was probably like Ben Shapiro or Dave Rubin. So she's out. She's gone. Lauren Southern has now announced that she's done with political videos. She's working on a documentary. She just wants to do her documentary work after a very bad New Zealand, tour where if you watch the videos of her and Stepan Molyneux in New Zealand, they go up to this one guy at a hotel, and they assume that he's a worker. And they say to him, well, what do you think about, like, the Muslims taking over your country? And he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Get away from me. I'm just here for a business meeting. Get away from me. You're a fascist. Get out of my face. And they run away. Yeah. And so her tour went really bad. It seems like a lot of these people, I know we were talking about the rise of the far right, but I also think there's glimmers of hope that they're starting to get on the defensive.
I think that is true as well. I mean, I would even throw in Cernovich, he's saying that, he's going to leave Twitter and, take a break from all of this. But, he always says that. But, yeah, even he seems to have kind of shifted a little bit. 'Cause it's also got to be so draining, And I think you also hit that level where it's like, you've made as much money as you're ever going to make bilking these people. You're not going to get any, like, I don't know if you saw it,
well,
but
I think the funding is drying up too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like, I don't know if you saw this morning, but like, I guess outside of like a rally with Ted Cruz and Trump, Alex Jones was like outside in the parking lot yelling at like a pile of dog shit. And I guess he was like trying to be like, he was interviewing, Beto O'Rourke or something like that. But he was just screaming at a pile of dog shit, and people were walking by like, what's going on? And, even people that were like, obviously like kind of like Alex Jones supporters were like, nothing, man. Like, he's just yelling at dog shit outside of this rally. So it's like how the mighty have fallen. Like this is what he's up to. So yeah, I think the money is kind of drying, and it's interesting too, like.
And I think the money from the higher levels of this, because I do think these people are getting funded by people, that had more backing than we would realize. I don't think it was all grassroots. I think a lot of this was astroturfed. And I've seen some evidence of that I can't speak, publicly towards. But, I think even that is drying up now because they see that the window is closing on that. Like, there was just that report that came out that New York Times, wrote about, the Hidden Tribes reports, where everyone seems to think that, we're in this moment of political division. But there's actually, and a researcher from Penn State, who I recommend, Yip-Chan Lelks, he was talking about this, 2 or 3 years ago. Most people are not that polarized. Most people are becoming depoliticized, actually. The Hidden Tribes report that was done recently indicates that, there is an exhausted majority. The exhausted majority is those of us who are sort of fed up with both Democrats and Republicans and are just tired of all the nonsense, including people like McInnes.
No, I think there's also, I think even beyond the like kind of like tired of all of this and or feeling kind of like defeated, I think there's also this like sense too that like, some of these things that like this is what I don't understand is this whole like, oh, it's a, war against men and all this stuff. It's like Trump won. Brett Kavanaugh is on the bench. Like, what are you talking about? There is no, like, you know what I mean? I mean, I think there is to an extent, not a war on men, but like, women and men are feeling comfortable talking about all of the, sexual assault and sexual violence and stuff. But like, that's what I don't get with like the McInnes stuff. It's like, dude, you are still on the top. Like, you're a rich white guy who lives in the suburbs. Like, you're doing amazing. for yourself.
Well, that's what the Hidden Tribes report was getting at, though, is, I mean, my background, I come from a good background. I have time to look into political matters and to be interested in art and sort of abstract literature and things like that. A lot of working class people don't have that luxury. So the Hidden Tribes report, which I recommend people look into, that's what it's getting at. Most people aren't as engaged as these Gavin McInnes types and a lot of these alt-right types are, they're suburban kids. And the reason they don't get along with people is because they've never gone to a city and dealt with people that aren't white. They're spoiled. They're spoiled brats. I'll say it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, entirely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I think this stuff matters. I think the movements can grow in a very bad way. But, at this point, I think a lot of these people are, I don't think we should overstate the threat is what I'm getting at.
No, I think that's sound advice as well. 'Cause it is, again, too, you can listen to, I mean, if you could even bear to do it, things like, MSNBC, like, Rachel Maddow will tell you how it's all, it's all going to fall apart any minute and, it's the end of the world and stuff. But yeah, I think the threat is a little, we shouldn't over-exaggerate, I think we shouldn't over-exaggerate these threats that are like, things even like the Proud Boys, which are going to fade away, I think.
They're the shock troops, essentially.
Yeah.
They're the shock troops of the Republican Party. There was just an article that came out about that, by the way. I forget, it's called The Proud Boys Are the Republican Party's Brown Shirts. Mm-hmm. And it's at the Maven Roundtable website, mavenroundtable.io. But, I mean, that analysis, I think, hits it right on the head. The Proud Boys are the Republican Party's brown shirts, trying to act like they're punk rock.
Yeah. Well, and, look what happened to the brown shirt, like the SA. They're all murdered. Like, the whole purge. Like if people have never seen The Dam by Luchino Visconti, it's a great film about the sort of rise and fall of a very prominent industrialist family in Germany that gets linked up with the Nazis for various reasons. But there's a very, famous sequence in the film where the sort of purge of all of these closeted SA soldiers happens. And it's like, like that's what happens to these kind of people. It's like that's what I again I almost feel bad for some of the Proud Boys and these people, because it's like you realize you're like totally expendable. Like once you've served your ultimate purpose, which it already seems like they have now, like McInnes is not turning his back, but like, I think he's going to be careful in the future, about their activities. 'Cause like he doesn't want to run into actual legal problems. I mean, if he keeps going around giving speeches about murdering leftists and then the Proud Boys go out and beat leftists, I mean, he's going to have a knock on the door from the police department. Quickly, because I want to get into the you just mentioned the kind of like punk aspect to this, which is interesting, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that with you. But what do you make of like Antifa and like the sort of like black clad anarchists? Because to me, this whole like, oh, they're a terrorist organization, it's just like a joke. But part of me like can't shake the idea that this is like all sort of by design. And like any like left-wing group like that just kind of like starts out of nowhere and becomes this sort of large and like ubiquitous, like you say Antifa and you get this image in your head, has to be controlled by, police intelligence units or something. Like they have to have informants in there. And it does make me wonder, these sort of like scuffles, if this isn't being provoked just to kind of have this sort of reaction, because that's sort of what they love. I don't know. What do you think of Antifa as like a movement? Cause it's like,
it's decentralized. That's the first thing that people have. It's not an organization. It's a decentralized, movement on the left. In Europe, it's much different, actually. In Europe, a lot of the people who describe themselves as Antifa, as well as the people in Europe who describe themselves as fascist, their family lines actually go back to anti-fascists from the past wars. Right. In America, it's a little different. I think you get a lot of people that are just jumping on the sort of Antifa bandwagon, and I think there's an attempt by Democrats, to sort of make it into like the resistance, the Antifa resistance, But the informant stuff, there's probably truth to that. We have the history of COINTELPRO, where they infiltrated both the left and the right. But overall, people can complain about Antifa all they want, right? But when you have paramilitary groups running around saying the things they're saying, the only way to get them out of your communities is to say, we're not going to tolerate you. And that's it. There's cases of that in Australia, when fascist parties would try to take over and people would complain about Antifa. Well, when Antifa goes away, that's when, those parties are able to, take power. So it's a kind of a gray area for me in some ways, because I to some extent I understand where they're coming from.
Oh, let me be clear too. There's nothing wrong with being anti-fascist. Like, I don't know how that's like, and I think that's part of the shortening the name to just Antifa or what, people aren't sure like what that means, but if you're saying like, oh, these so terrible anti-fascists, it's like, what's wrong with being opposed to fascism? Because again, like Gavin McInnes will be like, oh no, we're not fascists. Like, we hate the fascists. So yeah, there's such a like disconnect with all of that. But I don't know. I guess I just like the sort of like monolithic, the way that it's being portrayed in the media, which I guess is not actually accurate, is a little troubling to me. I don't know. There's something that's like off about this whole thing, and it just seems like they're just being co-opted by both the Republican and the Democratic Party.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that very much. It's funny because this also happened with like Insane Clown Posse's fans when the Juggalos, when Trump got elected, because the Democrats were trying to make like Democrats and some people on the left were trying to start like an anti-Trump Juggalo thing. And then there were people on the right trying to do that. And the Juggalos were just like, we don't want politics. Get out.
Yeah. No, and it's also just like, if you ever like, I've never been to like, the Gathering of the Vibes or something.
Yeah.
But, like, if you watch any documentary on it, it's like the most like, peaceful, like they're sort of, they sound like, these sort of like peace-loving hippies. They just happen to be.
It's interesting the code words they use too. If we're talking about the Juggalos, right?
Yeah.
Like they have the term piggies in a lot of their culture, and I found out what that means through someone I know that's a Juggalo. It's a pejorative for capitalists.
Yeah.
So they're actually clued into a lot of stuff.
No, totally. And I was gonna say too, it's like they are the most like open-minded. There's like none of this like. It's like gender equality, racial equality. It's like anyone can go and have fun at like the gathering. Like there aren't, like assaults and people aren't like, being terrible to one another. No, it's a really interesting, they do have this weird, like, strand of like left-wing stuff in a lot of their lyrics too. And this sort of, this fear of capitalism and whatnot. It's interesting. Juggalos are always fascinating. Not enough has been done on the phenomenon of Juggalos. But, well, speaking of that, though, this obviously it's like a music scene is really what it is. And I think that's sort of like more what they're about. And I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about that with you, JG, because you are much more like up on punk history than I am. And that is like there's a lot of strands of that kind of run through the like Proud Boys, right wing, like punk, Nazi, like skinhead stuff. And I want to just kind of get into that because there's like, this is something like I just don't fully understand is like how there's all of these like punk bands and like the whole like oi movement. And it's always sort of been straddling that line between like out and out right wing fascists. And then at the same time, there is like this sort of anti-fascist line to all of that. And I guess I just wonder how you kind of like view it, like as a like a genre of music, like how that's sort of changed over time. I mean, we were talking a little bit about like Cro-Mags and things like that, but there is this like weird, this sort of like prominent right-wing voices kind of coming out of the punk movement. And I guess it just seems so odd to me. It's like that like punks would be into, like it seems so not punk rock to be like a Nazi. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong on that.
Well, I think with a lot of it has to do with that like antisocial sort of, that individualism, like screw the establishment type thing, even if Trump is part of the establishment, you know. I mean, that's why you have Johnny Rotten running around in a MAGA shirt, I guess now. I mean,
yeah,
looking grim. He's looking grim. I never really liked the Sex Pistols much anyways, though. I was more a Public Image Limited guy. But, even guys like, I'm more into post-punk. So the one that doesn't surprise me really is Morrissey, who
yes.
Paul Joseph Watson is like a big fanboy of. I mean, Morrissey did songs like National Front Disco. He had a whole anti-Bengali song where he was making fun of the Bengalis.
Right.
And people are surprised now. I mean, there was always this romantic reactionary element in Morrissey's music and the broader post-punk and goth scene. I think with punk, it's more of, I think the New York punk scene, bands like Agnostic Front and Cro-Mags, I think it was more driven by sort of, working class like anger being driven into the wrong places. It's a very weird topic to unpack, though. I'd have to think about it. I think a lot of it has to do with that. Just, I'm not sure punk has always been that left wing as much people think.
Right.
There's that individualist anarchist strain of punk in a way.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of like Joy Division? Let's say. Is that, I know, cause you're just sort of mentioning like post-punk and that's sort of like the thing that always pops into my, and I am still a huge fan of Joy Division. But they definitely flirted with all of, obviously the name of the band is a direct reference to the Nazis.
Well, the thing with like Joy Division, post-punk and, the industrial scene, bands like Ministry and Skinny Puppy, they would play with Nazi imagery, but, it's hard to tell sometimes why they were doing that. Like I think in Joy Division's case, you could make the argument that it was sort of an FU to their parents who fought in the war,
right.
And sort of, this is what Thatcher's government really is. Screw you. But then I think too, like it gets murky. Like Susie Sue from Susie Sue and the Banshees.
Yeah.
Wearing, a swastika armband. But
yeah.
It gets really weird. Even do you know the Velvet Underground?
Yeah, of course.
Nico was actually really into like this weird esoteric Hitlerism, according to her friends. But I mean, at the time, she was doped up on heroin.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, it's just totally out of her mind.
There's so many factors that are going into all of this. But I think the big point that people have to take away is the way that these subcultures are prone. Because I mean, a lot of punk and goth culture, especially, they attract alienated people and. Especially alienated young people. So the far right, that's who they prey on. That's who they go after.
Yeah, no, I mean, it should come as no surprise that groups like punks and goths become kind of like co-opted into that. I don't know, it's definitely like become more of like an issue here in New York. And I have a lot of friends that are like, still with, punks and dress like punks and, are into the whole scene. And, like even they're kind of like freaked out by this sort of like, there's more and more of these like kind of like, like right wing skinheads. There's even like a bar I no longer go to because of this. It's like a bar downtown called Clockwork, where supposedly, these like two grad students, I think, had like a cell phone sticker with like the, anti-fascist, like the red and black flag. And these like guys from this like weird, I think it's called like the 211 Boot Boys, one of which is at all of the Gavin McInnes Proud Boys events, including this recent one. And they like beat the crap out of these two guys. And that's like a punk bar, that, never ever seemed like that. So it's just like a weird, it does, that kind of scares me more. I feel like there's more and more of this sort of like weird skinhead stuff happening. And maybe, I don't know.
That's my main concern with the alt-right. I don't think the alt-right is necessarily taking over anytime soon. At least not like the far ends of it. If, I don't think we're going to have the Adam Waffen division taking over the United States of America. What worries me are the lone wolf attacks and the violence that these skinhead groups can inflict upon people.
Yeah, no, me too. Right. And I think that that's what's like kind of scary to me about like the Proud Boys even. Not that like, they're this like organized force. Cause it's really like, they can't have that many members. You know what I mean? And obviously like, they always talk about, we've got, groups in Japan and Australia and all. It's like, yeah, but like what, you don't actually have control over them. You know what I mean? Like they're not all listening to like everything that McInnes says. But it's like the prevalence that they're just sort of out there and that like they want to get into a fight. Like they want to kill someone. I mean, you even look at like the whole Unite the Right thing and Heather Heyer's killer. This guy just was like, I'm going to just go do this. So yeah, that's the aspect that kind of scares me.
It's weird because they find ways to justify it, and then they'll claim that they weren't justifying it. The big thing now, if you look on 4chan, is NPCs. Do you mind if we talk about that?
Yeah, no, please. Let's get it. And then when you sent me a link to it, and then I realized it was non-playable character, which I do know because I used to play World of Warcraft, and there's tons of NPCs. But no, yeah, let's talk about this because this is so weird.
So, this meme starts on, I guess it started on 4chan, but, it was people referencing this study that was done a few years ago of college students that I think it found that like 17% of the population on the surveys claims that they have no inner monologue, which is where, so they don't have inner thoughts or images going on in their head. They're just sort of, what's the word?
Floating through life, just
yes, yeah, like scripting.
Yeah.
I've actually heard alt-right people. There's an alt-right YouTuber, Alidin Paladin or something. She actually debunked the study, which was funny because she's sort of this anti-SJW figure herself. But I mean, my initial thought was like, well, I mean, we're all socially conditioned in some ways, right? I don't think we're necessarily having a constant inner monologue going on, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that stuck out to me, and I posted this on Twitter, I'm like, so they're saying non-player characters. These are people without thoughts or feelings. They just, do whatever the media tells them to. And Taylor Swift says vote Democrat, so they all vote Democrat. That's sort of what the NPC meme is getting at. And it's obvious what they're trying to do with it. It's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
An entire group of people. But what I found funny about it was, these people, like the whole meme is saying, oh, these people don't think for themselves. They're not really human. They're non-player characters. And I'm just thinking to myself, all the people who use 4chan, it's like a giant Borg consciousness. Like, you guys are exactly what you're criticizing,
Entirely. They all have to think the same.
Well, I mean, that's the definition of 4chan. It's about the anonymous hive mind.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, the meme is worrying, because it gets into what we were talking about. I mean, with Heather Heyer and whatnot, because when you start looking at people and saying, like if you actually end up believing in this NPC meme, and I think a few of them kind of do believe in it, even if they claim they're joking or being ironic, like they don't see these people as human beings, people who disagree with them.
Well, there's even like, you sent me a link to like knowyourmeme.com, and there's like, I guess one of the early sort of like incarnations of this was there. I forget now the other. There's like another character alongside the NPC guy who's like, guess sort of represents the like 4chan alt writers who, you know, are actually smart and can think for themselves. And then he becomes like surrounded by these NPCs, and then they like, one of them like jams a fist through his heart, and then he becomes an NPC. So like, and again, back to this idiotic like obsession with like the Matrix and like Red Pill and all that stuff. It's like everyone's an enemy. You know, like that's the whole basis of the Matrix movie. Is that if you're not awake, you should be killed because you could be an agent. Which is like such a regressive, weird message.
Well, it's the new version of sheeple. NPC is the new version of sheeple. Right, yeah. I don't know, and the dehumanizing aspect of it. There's like, that's why the darker kind of recesses of like internet culture is like so like I don't know if you heard, like I did a show recently on like incels, and it's just like, you know, it's so terrifying. Like the incel stuff is like the incel stuff is, what was that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm saying like the incels thing is like, when you get like deeper and deeper into it, it's like a death cult where they're all encouraging each other to kill themselves.
Yeah, it's sad. You know, with the incel and the red pill stuff, I think the only thing those people can really, what they need is probably like serious therapeutic and psychological help, because they've turned it into an identity. You know, so they believe that there's a conspiracy of women that are keeping them from having sex, and that women have like this hive mind and, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, if you bring up points that contradict what they're saying, to them it becomes an attack on their identity. So they've internalized their own self-hatred and their misogyny, so that when you question it and you try to help them out of it, you can't, because it's like by questioning it, you're attacking their being. So you can't help them.
No, it's so dark. It really is. It's so dark and scary. And then especially when you see these guys who are like, you know, this self-professed incels, and like all of their friends are killing themselves. And then they're not even upset about it.
Those documentaries on incels that I've seen, they're not like bad looking kids, you know, like.
No, I know. No, absolutely. There's no excuse. Everyone can date, okay? There's there's a person out there for you.
Are you familiar? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying it's like, that's what with the incel stuff, it's just like, you need to get over this like idea that you can't find someone that would sleep with you.
I noticed, see, they each have names for it. Like there's what is it? Like some of them say they're brain cells, they're too smart, and that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like they're broke cells or poor cells. It's like I think a lot of it has to do with, one woman may have rejected them, right? And they get stuck in this like stasis because of that one woman, you know? And that's why they think everything is sort of a hive. You know, another aspect of that I find interesting, because, I'm doing a whole Halloween series for, Parallax Views right now. Horror is a topic that, fascinates me, whether it's in literature or movies or any other, media format. And I think horror has a lot to do with it. There's a YouTuber by the name of ContraPoints, and she, did a whole video about incels where she argues that like Red Pill is kind of about this ontology of horror. And what she meant by that is that, you know, they look at information, and whatever seems the most hurtful to them personally, that's what's true. So it's like, if they see like something about, you know, I guess one of the big things with Red Pill is like the shape of your jaw has to be a certain way or women won't be attracted to you. Yeah, well, it's that hurts the most to them if they really believe that and they don't have that perfect jawline or whatever. You know, it's sort of an ontology where whatever is the most hurtful to your being has to be the most true. It's very weird.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't.
True with the NPC stuff too. I mean, I think we've all had thoughts like, how do people, we have different views than the mainstream in a lot of ways. And sometimes we just think like, how do people not see what we're seeing? And that can be a shock to people, but for these people that are into the NPC memes and the 4chan stuff, they take it to the next level. They take their fears to this, level where it's completely unhealthy.
Yeah. No, that's right. To the point where it becomes this like unshakable obsession, where there's nothing else in their life except for this destructive online community. We were sort of talking earlier about like, the like right wing stuff is maybe not as bad as we think it is, or that a lot of these, groups are kind of fading away. But, it's like the incel kind of groups, like the more kind of like, even, or like the QAnon stuff, it's like, that's where I see a lot of this stuff heading. It's like more and more in that direction.
Oh, we could talk about QAnon for hours. I'm trying to interview, one of the people who started the genre of gaming known as alternate reality games, and he's actually a figure that people think created QAnon, but he still denies it. QAnon comes out of alternate reality gaming, though. You can see the parallels very, very quickly. There's a million and one things going on, though, when we get into these topics.
Oh, and there's like also, I still don't even really get like the whole like, you hear people saying like, oh, it's just a LARP. Like, what does that actually mean?
Live action role playing.
Well, no, I know that. No, absolutely. I know people that LARP. It's like that, again, it's like that weird mix-mash of like, geek, nerd culture, video games, all, cause like Jack Posobiec, is always talking about how, that whole event was just a LARP, and this is a LARP, and that's a LARP. Right. And it's like, what are you fucking saying? Like that it's all, again, it's nothing is real. I don't know. I don't get, but it's just like a weird.
You know who's a good example of what you're talking about? Actually, are you familiar with Weave?
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, the hacker Weave is the perfect example of this whole LARPing thing, because Weave started out LARPing. It was like, I'm going to be into like, I'm going to make Nazi and racist comments, and I'm joking around. But it's odd, because I think the more people get into this stuff, the more the play acting turns into actual belief.
Mm. Well, I mean, I think that's that's my fear with some of the like Proud Boys stuff, is like, Oh,
it'll escalate, yeah.
Yeah, and you already see that. It's like, cause there are totally guys that are in, that are Proud Boys, and they go through the idiotic like ritual stuff, where we mentioned it before. I mean, like the cereal game where you get punched in the stomach super hard and you have to name 5 cereals. It's like so stupid and childish. But, there's like, there are other levels to that where it's like you have to go get arrested. You have to like commit an act of violence on someone. And again, McGinnis would be like, oh, you don't have to do that. I'm just saying that's like the 4th degree, but it's like, no, people are going to go do that. And, the people in that are already kind of like escalating. McGinnis is a prime example of just, ratcheting up the extremist rhetoric, to a point where he's like giving a speech about murdering leftists and being like, no, don't actually go do it. But this guy's a hero for doing it.
Right.
And then you get people that go out and do wild shit.
Yeah. There's one more thing. I know we're running up against the clock.
We got like 15 minutes, sir.
Okay. Well, I wanted to get back to this horror aspect of the right, the psychological horror they have. I always found it interesting that so many on the right are fans of the sort of weird fiction author H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft was a very weird author. Of course, he wrote the Cthulhu mythos and all that, right?
But Lovecraft, guy too, right?
Lovecraft was terrified of people that were different from him. Yeah. He wrote a story called the Horror at Red Hook, or the Terror at Red Hook, one of those. And it's literally a guy walking through the city, seeing immigrants and being like terrified. Lovecraft is like the template for a lot of these people, because Lovecraft, it's even beyond racism. Lovecraft was just he was a guy that was terrified of everyone.
Yeah.
And everything. He's afraid of the stars. He's afraid of the cosmos. And I don't find it surprising that a lot of right-wingers are fascinated by Lovecraft to this day. Along with, like, Robert E. Howard, who, they love their Conan the Barbarian, but, Robert E. Howard could never be Conan. That's why he only wrote about it.
Right. So...
They're terrified of everything.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was going to say. I mean, it's like this fear of, like, literally everything. And that's what I don't understand so much. I mean, the mentality of some of this stuff is like, you're literally, like, afraid of, like, everything, but at the same time, it's like, life is still pretty good for you overall. Like, you're not being, killed by cops left and right for the most part. You're not, poor on welfare. You're not actually going to be murdered by, MS-13. I mean, that's like the Trump with this caravan, his a migrant caravan. And he's just saying, there's some Middle Easterners in there, terrorists are amongst, the caravan. And it's like, what? I mean, and I truly believe, like, maybe he is like, he's like that afraid. Like, Trump is the perfect example. I mean, he's probably terrified of everything. The threat of anything. And now, he just instills in people this, like, constant fear, where it's like well, if we don't elect this person, then, like, the whole jobs versus mobs, like, slogan is just so fear-based. Like, that's what you're gonna get.
Have you ever read, Dune, the series Dune by Frank Herbert?
Only the first book. I read part of, Dune Messiah, the second one.
Fear is the mind killer. I always love that quote. Because that's what we're dealing with. It's the mind killer. That's why it's so useful for right-wing groups. It's how they control young people. Because they induce this fear into you. Like, even with the whole obsession with, like, cucks. That whole obsession, they're afraid of black men taking their women, their white women. Right. It's like, I mean, it's really insidious. That's why I've always liked, the movie American History X is actually, like, a very good representation of a lot of this. Because, like, what the Stacy Keach character, who's actually based on Tom Metzger, who's one of the craziest of these like neo-Nazi groups, also had a lot of money originally. He was one of the backers. But American History X, it really gets into that because, they take advantage of Edward Furlong's character after his brother goes to jail. The kid's very vulnerable. So that's what these people do. They're preying on vulnerable and often very lonely young men. And it's sad because I think a lot of these teenage boys, they don't realize, like, it will get better. Like, it's not the end of the world. And, I don't get it. Especially the sexual politics aspect of it. Because, you talk to these right-wingers, they think they're, everyone is having sex, 24/7. Like, I don't know, when you're in a relationship, most of that relationship is, it's you and her, or, it's you and your partner emotionally taking care of each other.
Yes.
It's not just sex. And also, I mean, as much as I was just reading a sociological paper that it found that the median for men and women were about 3 to 6 partners in their lifetime.
Yeah, right? I know. That's the other. No, I know. Yeah. I don't know what these people are talking about. Like,
they watch too many 80s movies. Like,
yeah, I know. It's like people are literally just not, like, bumping around having anonymous sex, like, every day. No, I know it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Once again, it's people that don't, they don't have any actual, like, real experience, like, living in the world. They're so sheltered. It's all so controlled. I mean, it's like the Proud Boys. They're a bunch of white guys from the suburbs that like play acting at being badass thugs and roaming around New York and doing punk shit. And it's like all a complete and utter lie. It's all a joke. Yeah, I know the sexual politics of it are really bizarre to me. I don't know what like, that's.
I remember I said to one of these incel types, they were like, I don't get to have sex. No one cares about me. Like, well, does your mother care about you? And he was like, yes. And I said, well, do you have sex with your mother? I mean, Like, not every aspect of a relationship goes back to sex.
Well, no, I mean, and that's this whole, we were saying earlier, it's like they criticize the sexually liberated women, because they're all degenerates and what, but like, all they want to do is have sex. And that's what they think everything is really about. Like, that's
the other humorous part of it, because a lot of these white supremacists, they want their women to be submissive. And there are cultures where women still take on a more submissive role. A lot of, Latino Catholic women would fit that role more. But they don't want to date them because, I don't want to date the immigrant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but it's funny you mentioned that, because then there is and we don't have time to get into it, but there's like a weird, there's this whole other subset of Latino Nazis and Latino skinheads, and there's long been this weird, acceptance, like Nazi lowriders, for instance, the prison gang, a lot of them are Hispanic, and they're a Nazi gang, ostensibly, I mean, they're really about selling meth and heroin, but that exists, and there's this weird thing where it's like, well, you can date a white Hispanic, that's okay, It's like, right. What, how are you, the mental gymnastics involved? It's like, just then date whoever the hell you want to.
Well, there's one more thing I wanted to get at real quick, since we only have, a few more minutes. Just on this topic, the thing that I feel most people are missing is, so much of these people that you see on the front lines, people like McInnes, people like Richard Spencer, these are front people. If you want to know the real people that are pushing a lot of this stuff, they're much more behind the scenes. It's people like P.T. Carlo or the University of Colorado Boulder's E. Christian Kopf. Kopf is actually the guy who has translated all of Julius Evola's work. And he is in the academy. He's teaching kids.
Okay.
But we don't hear about names like E. Christian Kopf and P.T. Carlo, who used to run a magazine called Thermidor. These are the movers behind everything in a lot of ways. I don't want to say it too conspiratorially. I don't think it's like that. But I think they do a lot more than people realize.
Absolutely. Well, and yeah, I mean, even before some of the people, Yarvin, I mean, I don't think he's that well known to people out there. I mean, not even to, me, and I consider myself kind of up on a lot of this stuff, but those are the people that are really kind of, like you said, kind of pulling strings, and they're just using all of these, well, cause that's the other thing too, it's
Have you seen the Milo emails? Milo, there's, emails that were released by BuzzFeed, between Milo and Curtis Yarvin, and, they were talking about Peter Thiel, and Yarvin said, oh, I was just over Peter Thiel's house over the election or whatever.
Yes.
And Yarvin said, Peter is clued in. He knows.
Yeah.
He just won't say this stuff publicly. So.
Oh, entirely.
I mean, Yarvin could just be building himself up, but
No, I'm sure that. Well, this is. I mean, he wrote that awful book, basically being like, minorities are idiots. He wrote it at Stanford at the time. I can't remember what the name of it is, but yeah, Peter Thiel is totally clued into all of this kind of stuff. And again, too, I mean, he's just using Trump as a front for his own agenda. He's just a convenient idiot that got elected. And Peter Thiel can, pull his strings or whatever, show up at these business council meetings and get all sorts of wacky stuff passed or pushed through, to enrich his own companies, just by using Trump. Very quickly, though, JG, because we've only got a few minutes left, remind the listeners once again where they can go to find your work, also on Twitter and stuff like that.
ParallaxViews.podbean.com.
Okay, excellent. We will link up to all of that in the show notes. JG, Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening, and I will be talking to you all very soon.
No rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Have you experienced the miracle of CBDs? They can help you reduce suffering, reduce stress, help you sleep better, modulate inflammation in the body, and is absolutely safe. Meta Hemp Solutions offers a radically innovative approach to CBDs for exceptional results. Stop suffering and reduce your stress now. Isn't it time for a good night's sleep? Stop worrying about tomorrow today. Lab tested for potency, purity, and is non-psychoactive. Free shipping to all 50 states. Try our product risk-free. Money-back guarantee. Use code AFR15 to get 15% off. That's Alpha Foxtrot Romeo 15 to get 15% off. Offer ends soon, so visit MetaHemp Solutions today at metahempsolutions.com or call 833-858-7500. Suffer no more. Get rid of the stress and sleep better. Get our product now at metahempsolutions.com. That's metahempsolutions.com.
We all know that they're not telling us the truth. So stand up for your rights, demand the real medicine, and your right to use it and grow it. This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
Are the trials of modern-day living getting to you? Feeling tired all the time with no energy? Is proper nutrition a challenge? Having trouble sleeping? All of these evils, sleeplessness, tiredness, poor nutrition, and stress, wreak havoc on our bodies and minds. Enerfood, our incredible organic superfood, has been here to save your life day by day for over 14 years. With the densest nutrition on the planet, Enerfood is filled with 20 superfoods and super herbs designed to cure the evils of modern life. Enerfood will turn you into a superhero, and your family and friends will notice. Don't you want that get-up-and-go feeling you need to seize the day? Why wait? Try it today and start feeling great again. Order now at www.enerfood.com and use the code TR15 for 15% off, or call 866-762-9238 to place your order by phone. Use code TR15 for 15% off Enerfood at www.enerfood.com.
Tell the truth. Don't be bullshitting people. There's enough bullshit as it is. In fact, there's just enough. Did you know that? There's just enough bullshit to hold things together in this country. Bullshit is the glue that binds us as a nation. Where would we be without our safe, familiar American bullshit? Land of the free, home of the brave, the American dream. All men are equal, justice is blind, the press is free, your vote counts. Business is honest, the good guys win, the police are on your side, God is watching you, your standard of living will never decline, and everything is going to be just fine. The official national bullshit story. I call it the American okey doke.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, roger, copy. 3, 2, 1. Engage.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio.